You're watching Newsday on the BBC. I'm Sharonjeet Lail in Hong Kong. The headlines. Hong Kong's pro-democracy candidates sweep the pro-Beijing establishment aside in district council elections. Turnout was more than 70%, the highest ever recorded in any Hong Kong election.
Well, you can hear all the excitement here, and that is because a 23-year-old democracy activist has just unseated a pro-government incumbent who has held this seat for the last 20 years.
And I'm Kasia Madeira in London. Also coming up here on Newsday, leaked documents reveal that prison camps in Western China are being used to brainwash the Muslim Uyghur minority. And the billionaire former mayor of New York, Michael Bloomberg, announces that he wants to run for US president.
This is BBC World News. It's Newsday.
Welcome. It's 11 p.m. in London, 6 p.m. in New York and 7 a.m. here in Hong Kong, where pro-establishment, pro-democracy parties rather, are on course for a landslide victory in local elections. Now, with almost half the vote counted, the pro-democracy camps are on course to win. They have 7 seats for every one held by the pro-establishment camp. Now, these are only local district council elections, but they show a huge wave of support for the protest movement over the last 6 months that have rocked the city in often violent demonstrations. Now, it's no doubt that those protests have motivated Hong Kongers to turn out in large numbers. Some 71% of voters showed up at the polls. The numbers just a few minutes ago showed pro-democracy parties have already taken 201 seats. Pro-establishment parties, meanwhile, have just 28 so far. These are the numbers being reported by local media, and there's still a way to go yet. Of course, Rupert Wingfield-Hayes was there watching the results as they came in, and he sent this report.
In the eastern district of Hong Kong Island this morning, the queue to vote at the Shau Kei Wan polling station went on and on and on.
We're seeing queues like this in districts all over Hong Kong today. People waiting for an hour, even up to an hour and a half to vote. And people are telling us they have never seen anything like this in a local election here in Hong Kong before.
We didn't have to line up before. Everyone is more enthusiastic. They really want to contribute to the society.
The passion of those standing for election today is out of all proportion to the power of the local council seats being contested. But for the opposition, today is a referendum on the protests that have rocked Hong Kong for the last 6 months.
In 2015,
David and his mother Anne are on opposite sides of that fight.
So we can see just old people, pro-government, pro-Beijing, they control the power, they control the party, they control everything, even though the economy. So we can take it back to control and start to have more strength and power in there.
As counting got underway tonight, the turnout for today's election had topped 71%. That is the highest turnout ever recorded in any Hong Kong election. The early signs are also that the pro-democratic camp is heading for a sweeping victory.
Well, you can hear all the excitement here, and that is because a 23-year-old democracy activist has just unseated a pro-government incumbent who has held this seat for the last 20 years.
Scenes like these are being repeated across Hong Kong tonight. The new, very young faces of Hong Kong politics. The question now is, will any of these victories have an impact on the Hong Kong government or on Beijing?
Rupert Wingfield-Hayes reporting. We will be back in Hong Kong with Sharonjeet in just a moment. But first of all, I want to briefly update you on some of the day's other news stories. The billionaire businessman Michael...
Well, returning now to our top story here in Hong Kong, where pro-democracy parties have thrashed the pro-establishment camp. And some of those candidates who've lost their seats in the elections include pro-Beijing lawmaker. This is Junius Ho. He's one of the most controversial politicians in the city. He suffered a shock defeat. Well, my colleague Stephen McDonald is here with me. He was watching all the results as they came in overnight. So Hong Kongers, Stephen, waking up to a new reality. These are only local district council elections, but what a shock.
I think the pro-democracy camp, even in their wildest dreams, couldn't have imagined a result like this, that they would have obliterated their political opponents like this. You know, we're out at a polling station earlier tonight. We went to several polling stations, but one of them, as soon as the polls closed, you know, the general public can go and watch the count. And people were waiting to get in there. They wanted to see what was happening. And that's because, well, they don't trust Hong Kong's authorities. They don't trust the institutions in this city anymore. And so they want to make sure it's a free and fair election. And there they were watching the count in their seat. But then they're down on their phones as well and watching the results coming in from elsewhere. And you could just see in the room, bing, 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 and the sort of shock and applause every now and then as results came in. And it became clear that this was just going to be such a comprehensive slaughter of the pro-Beijing camp. Now, where does this leave, for example, Carrie Lam? I mean, this is going to embolden the pro-democracy forces. They're out there backing the activists. And they've won so comprehensively. And she's been running this line, you know, there's this silent majority backing us, backing the police, backing our strategy. I don't know how you run that line anymore, given just the extent of the result.
And I mean, it was so overwhelming because obviously watching the voting taking place on Sunday, these overwhelming numbers, a record turnout for any election here in Hong Kong. These are local district council elections, though. This is the lowest rung of government. So what real difference can these candidates make?
Well, the funny thing is, it's the lowest rung of government, but it's also the only real elections here. Because, you know, you think about it, the LegCo is half appointed by this committee stacked by pro-Beijing loyalists. The chief executive position completely chosen by this committee of pro-Beijing loyalists. It's only these district council elections that are a genuine democratic exercise. And so I think people thought, well, let's turn out, let's try and send a message here and turn this into something more than just a local council election, make it a referendum on Carrie Lam's administration and the way it's been handling this crisis. And if that's the way it's interpreted by the community more generally, well, it's a very tough result for the government here. They've got a lot of explaining to do. I mean, you know, their candidates at the moment are 300 down on the pro-democracy camp, so it's huge.
Robbing, isn't it? Well,
completely.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. Of course, you'll be following this story, and you've been here for several months covering those protests as well. So a shock election result here in Hong Kong, a landslide victory for the pro-democracy camp. I'll hand it over back to you.